Hey, buddy. Why don't we put you over here on your dog bed? So this is Ferris, and this is Victoria, and this is their roadmap to success. Now, Victoria just got added to the pack a couple weeks ago. Ferris has been here since he was a puppy. Sit. That was kind of an accidental sit, but we'll still reward you for it. How about we get you to lie down, buddy? Now, we have hardwood floors, and he's an elderly dog, and one of the things I mentioned in the Guardian, she might want to go to, I like going to Carpet Land, but usually carpet stores will have remnant sections that are left over from install, and you probably find some stuff that's actually not a bad carpet that you could cut out and just fit in this area, because this is the main hangout room. He likes to hang out in the laundry room because I think it's a little bit of a confined area, but I think it's also a little warmer in there with the dryer. And as you can see, he's having some difficulty getting up and going down and gripping the floor. Sometimes they're just old dogs will stand and their legs start sliding out on a hardwood floor. And it's winter and it's a Midwest come. And so what I would recommend is, recommend to the Guardian is you get a remnant piece and put that down temporarily to help the old guy. Basically the primary issue with these dogs, that's a little passive training, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the primary issue with these dogs is they get in people's personal space. And the reason for this is because every time they do this, the Guardian reaches over and pets them. So anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're reinforcing, and the Guardian has unintentionally trained her dogs to invade her personal space to ask for attention. Now, she's a new dog, so she doesn't really know this yet. She's kind of learning it from watching his behavior. But she likes attention too, and if he invades her personal space or paws at her and gets attention or barks at her, she's going to start doing those same things. So what we went over here was a couple of things. You want this? Sit. Sit. Okay, so we went over, one of the first things we talked about was adding some rules. Dogs are all about what they see us do, and so if we actually are enforcing rules on a consistent basis, that helps dogs see us acting like a leader. When we go to work, they don't recognize that as us working. They just look at it and think that we're out partying. So basically, correcting a dog on a consistent basis really helps them. Now, dogs learn through consistency, repetition, and good timing. You have a window of 3 seconds to correct sit, or come, excuse me, to correct or reward a dog for them to have the ability to make the connection, but it has to be repeated enough times. Sweetheart, let's put it over here for them to finally put 2 and 2 together. That's why, if you notice, when he comes to me, I'm petting him. Although I said sit last time, I meant to say come, and I'll do it again here. So the end result of what I'm looking for, come, is for him to come to me. So if every time he comes to me on his own, I pet him and I say the word come, it's the same thing other than the fact that I'm not asking him to do it. I'm just simply recognizing he's doing it and rewarding him for doing so and saying the command word. The Guardian here has done the same mistake that a lot of people make, is the dog comes and she's like, oh, what a good boy. Well, oh, good boy is not come. I understand we have Victoria's on the furniture, which is one of the rules we went over. We'll talk about there in a sec. But if every time the dog comes to you and you pet it and say come, then when you do ask the dog to come, it's much more inclined to do so. If the dog sits on its own and you organically and we pet it and say sit, come, they're more inclined to want to do those sort of things. And now for the lay down position, the dogs don't really have a command for that. I would, every time the dog lays down next to you, come up with a fun command. I use the word crash. Some people say chill. I got to teach it. It took our puppy class. He's a Cubbies fan. He calls it slide because he's a baseball fan. But coming up with fun command words like that where you get somebody to chuckle can be very beneficial and helpful. So that's passive training, is simply just recognizing the dog and petting it or giving affection or attention within 3 seconds come of it doing something that we want. Now the caveat to this is if I do that when he gets too close, I'm rewarding him for the behavior, the primary issue the Guardian would want to do. So when he's approaching, but he's still like about a foot away, that's where I want to pet and kind of keep him in that zone. When he pushes in further, then I immediately stop petting him. Now, if you want your dog to be on your lap and you invite your dog on your lap, that's different. Right now, these dogs are just doing it, and you can create a competition where one dog will do it, well, I'm going to do it too, because the other dog got some attention, I'm going to get more, and now they're climbing up on top of you. So like the video we talked about above, we talked about how we can create personal space and a 1-foot buffer zone. And so I'd like the Guardian to get in a habit of defining a 1-foot bubble of personal space. And if the dog's invaded, you're going to use the third escalating consequence to stand up if necessary. By the time if they already invade our space, we can't really hiss because they've already broken the rule at that point. But if we stand up abruptly, most dogs will take a step backwards. Then you pause for a second, dog stays in place, then you sit down. If you sit down, the dog starts coming forward, just bounce up again. Okay. Just like we just got done going through a feeding ritual, and Victoria kept on trying to come in the kitchen. And we're trying to establish, hey, when Ferris is eating, you can't be within 7 feet. But she doesn't know that, so she just kept on trying to come in. We had to correct about 6 or 7 times, but after a 7th time, she stayed behind the line. So if your dog keeps on trying to do these things over and over, invade your personal space, and you keep standing up to correct, you'll have to do it a couple times, but you're burning the energy to communicate, this is actually what I want, and I'm going to follow through. One of the dirty secrets of dog behavior is always outlasting your dog. So if your dog does it 100 times and you stand up 100 times, he's fine. And because we've been doing this for a long time, we have an older dog that's established neural pathways and myelin is set in its ways. So we're going to have to do more of it. But if I'm like, so that is the example that I'm going to show. Okay, so some of the rules we talked about is not being around the furniture. Now Ferris is old; he cannot get on the furniture. And I'm waiting for him to move away. I'm not telling him what to do. I'm waiting for him to do it. And once he does, then I sit down. I'm not saying you do this every time, because sometimes you want to pet him and give him the passive training. Come, but again, I'm keeping a foot of space here before I'm actually. And if he invades that, that's when I would stop and I would lean back. Okay. All right. So because Victoria can get on the furniture and he can't, that can create a little bit of an imbalance where he's a little frustrated because he used to be able to get on the furniture and now he can't. And also it confuses her into what her position is and gives her easy access to invade people's personal space. So what I would recommend it is for 30 days, or as long as the problem's still going on, not allowing her on the furniture. Now once this is carpeted, I would also get the lining, so the lining is always down there, keep the kennel open. So they have multiple places that they can lay down and hang out because we're going to take this away. Another rule would be they have to sit at the door. So I go to the door and I say sit one time. The more you repeat it, the less you mean it. So if I say sit and the dog doesn't sit within about 3 seconds, I walk away from the door. I'll talk about that in a second. And I wait and sit down somewhere. Don't stand because that looks like you're waiting for them. Wait 1 minute, then go back to the door and tell the dogs to sit again and tell them don't ask them. If they don't sit, then this time I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes. Next time for 8 minutes. So each time they don't comply, come. They have to wait twice as long before I give them another opportunity to comply. And as soon as their butt hits the ground, when I tell them to sit, I open the door and let them out. Or if I say him sit and she sits and he doesn't, I might let her out. Now because he's an older dog, he has hip problems, we might not have him participate in that particular rule, but I would definitely do it for her. We also went through petting with a purpose, which is if he nudges me like that and I pet him, then I'm telling him, yeah, you're the boss of me, which can make him feel responsible for me and also make sure that he doesn't listen to me. So if a dog nudges you with its nose, sticks his nose into your arm and nudges or barks like he was doing demand barking, that's what that was. For petting with a purpose, what we want to do is we want to give him a counter order. Tell him to sit. When he sits, then I pet him under his chin and say the word sit and only the word sit. Not good dog, not good boy, or any of the rest of that stuff. Now, the more we do that, after a while, the dog will start coming and sitting, offering us a sit ahead of time as a way of asking for attention. I like to say that this is the dog's way of prepaying for some attention. Now we taught our dog a better, more appropriate way to interact with us, and they're inclined to do so. Come. Now, over there, he was demand barking. You know, I have a lot of people that get confused about when should I correct the dog, when should I ignore the dog. People usually get this wrong. The way you want to look at it is if the dog is offering a behavior or an action to try to provoke a response from you, you want to ignore that behavior. If the dog is barking at a squirrel or doing something in your presence that you disagree with, that's when you want to definitely intercede. Anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're rewarding, but anything your dog does in your presence that you don't disagree with, you're giving your approval to. But if the dog is trying to get my attention, well, then any interaction, even looking at the dog, is validating. But if the dog is doing other things, offers a sit or something like that, then I give it attention. Now we're teaching the dog to demonstrate or offer positive or acceptable or desired behaviors in order to get our attention. On the barking, if we ignore the dog completely when it demand barks, we don't even look in its direction, it gets no result from us. After a while, it will stop doing that. It does it now because normally we stop what we're doing. It's a big bark, and you give the dog attention. Even if you're correcting the dog, good attention and bad attention are pretty much the same thing. So we want to ignore things if the dog's trying to get our attention, but we really want to make sure, that we do this passive training is kind of the same thing we do with kids. When a little kid does something we want, we make sure we make a big deal out of it. They get an A on a test, we put the test on the refrigerator. They do something else, we give them a gold star. We make sure to showcase those things. Well, a lot of us only pet our dog or give it attention when it's doing the wrong thing. Like I said earlier, the guardian had been petting the dog when it invaded their personal space, so she taught them to do that. But a lot of times the dog maybe steals a shoe and runs around and we chase the dog. Well, now stealing the shoe is a great way to get the human's attention. Barking at the squirrel is a great way to get the human's attention. So sometimes dogs will misbehave or we train them to misbehave to get our attention. So make sure that we're not doing that. Petting with a purpose and passive training will really help you adding a little bit of structure to petting them and stop us from petting them for invading personal space or undesirable actions. A couple of housekeeping things. If the dog is standing in front of me and I walk around it, I'm telling the dog, you have more status than I am because I'm burning energy to walk around you rather than making you burn the energy to get out of my way. Now, the dog's laying on the ground, that's different. If you say get up, that's just being a jerk. But if the dog's standing in your way, walk through them. So the dog's getting a habit of moving away from us as opposed to the other way around. Now, he's an older dog, he's 13. So for him, I might make an exception for him if I know it's going to cause him pain or discomfort to try to move out of the way. But for her, I would walk through and don't hesitate, crash. You just lay down in front of the camera. But don't hesitate, don't slow down when you get her. And a lot of the things the guardian were getting to the dog, and the dog was here, and she was marching up to it, and then she would get to it, and she was kind of doing this. Kind of shove walking. Don't shove walk. You just want to walk so briskly at the dog, they almost have a flinching experience when they move away. So a little bit of suddenness and deliberateness to your steps will really help. Let's see, what else? The guardian has a tendency to use a lot of versions of the command word as opposed to the actual command word. I asked her, I said, what's the word come is the word? And she said, the dog's name and come here. Well, neither one of those is a dog's name. So what I would do is write down a list, and I know it sounds like you're in school, but writing that down will help you commit it a little bit more to memory. And because we're single here, we might want to put up a couple posts. Come, sit, crash. Just in random places where the dog happens to do that a lot. So if I'm looking up and I see that, that's a visual indicator to me, and it'll help me remember those sort of things. Let me see, what else? Feeding, we add structure to mealtime. They don't have a problem with feeding, but they do have a problem with personal space, and I think that that's a leader-follower dynamic. So by adding, since eating is such a primarily important activity for dogs, if we put a little bit of structure on that, and the dog says, the only way that I can eat is I wait till my turn, and I have to watch my human eat first, that way the human is perceived as having authority or more status than the dog, and they're going to eat one at a time. So when Ferris is eating, we're not going to let Victoria in. So Ferris doesn't have to look over his shoulder. Now again, they don't have any problems with it, but they still see us enforcing that rule. That's one of the ways we act as a leader in the dog's eyes. Now, the guardian runs a lot. She gets her dogs a lot more exercise. I'd say you're in like the 1 percentile of all the clients I work in because she gets a lot of exercise for the dogs, which is awesome. But there are other things we can do like fetch, using a laser and different things like that. And sometimes we need, she goes for like a 6-mile run, or not necessarily every day, but she goes for a long run in the morning, but she's also in the kennel during the day. So now the guardian comes home and lets her out during lunch, which is awesome because her guardian does not live anywhere near where we live, or work anywhere near where she lives. But taking her to daycare will be beneficial socially as well as depleting excess energy. And that way the old guy can kind of sit at home and he's going to sleep all day anyways. And that way when she comes home, her energy is being closer to matching his because she's going to get it all out running around the young dogs at Paw, one of our favorite doggy daycares, where we're going to offer dog daycare training, which will hopefully work with her on some heel and leash work. Let's see, what else? So the human needs to, for eating, the human needs to eat something first, 5 bites of something. Doesn't have to be a real meal. 5 blueberries will work, 5 chips, bites of a cracker or a chip. And then the dogs eat one at a time. Ferris's word, and she might change it, but she said feast for Ferris and victuals for Victoria because they're a little bit of alliteration. And we work in a media company. So let me see, what else? I'm trying to think what else. Keep the kennel door open whenever Victoria goes in the kennel. I would say kennel, even if she goes there on her own, so we create more of a positive association with that. I showed the guardian how to use the martingale collar. She already has a martingale collar, but she runs a lot and she's on a harness and she's running in front of the guardian. Sometimes she crosses over in front. Well, what I would do is just try to keep the leash a little bit shorter and keep the dog on her right side or left side. Always have her on the same side. So she knows this is my place in the formation when we're running. I kind of keep the leash short but not tense. That way, you can keep her from getting in front of you. We also went over a focus exercise. If you forget how to do the focus exercise, let me know. But remember, we're going to go work in different places in the house until we eventually get up to 20 seconds on that second movement. Then we're going to go do it outside, but we're going to go back to 1 second, 1 second, and then eventually work ourselves up to 20 seconds, but we should be able to move faster. Then I'd like, when we're out walking, and walking her with the martingale will help her get a little bit used to it. Victoria was not a fan of the martingale. Her tail went between her legs. I think it's just a different sensation. And what we did is we just dropped the leash and we let her walk away, and the tail started coming back up. Remember, we don't want to ever force her to do things that she doesn't want. She just kind of puts her mouth on you a little bit as a way of disagreeing, and so we just don't want to even get her in the position where we need to do that. So message me if you have questions about the martingale and how to do that. But I'd also like to see Ferris. She takes Ferris for a walk at night, but maybe if possible, and I know sometimes as we're rushing in the morning, but it'd be nice if she could actually take Ferris and Victoria out for a walk around the block, then drop Ferris off, and then go for a run with Victoria. Dogs, it's a very communal thing to go for a walk or a run, and every time you leave her with him, he probably has a little bit of past precepts about, oh, remember, I used to be the guy who would go with her. And so this way he gets a little bit of fun, and by the time he's about winded, we drop him off. He's like, thank God they're not asking me to run. And then we get to go run, and we have a nice little warm-up. It's more exercise is going to stimulate more muscle activity, which is going to help him stay a little bit longer. Remember to use, for him, for his food, decrease his food a little bit. He's not fat, but he could weigh a little bit less, and it'll be better for his joints. Get about 4 or 5 green beans, fresh green beans, and chop them up into little bits. Sprinkle them in with his food. That'll help him feel more full. Also, broccoli and carrots ward off 2 types of cancer that are prevalent in dogs. So I actually get carrots, and I give my dogs carrots like every other day as like a bone. That might be something we do. We eat a lot of vegetables in this house, which is good. And then broccoli ferrets, just take the tops of broccoli and just demolish it on top of their food. We want to try to do what we can to ward off types of cancer. Let me see. There's probably other things that I'm forgetting, and that's okay. If the guardian has any questions, make sure you call me or text me. I don't charge for phone calls or text. Text is the fastest way to reach me. Sometimes I get about 50 emails a day. If you email me, it might take me a week to get back to you. But a text message, especially if you text me a picture of the dogs, hey, I'm not going to say her name, but this is so-and-so, and these, here's a picture. I had a question. I forgot what I do for this. The last thing I'm going to go over, because I think the guardian was a little bit confused on what they were. I gave her a little spot test, and she did not do that great, so I'm going to put it in this video. And so basically, the things we went over to disagree with the dog were we used the 4 escalating consequences. First one, come. That's not an escalating consequence. That's passive training. You have a little bit of a dirt or something down here. Or is it a scar? No, it's just a little dirt. Yes. A little bit of dirt, so I might want to check that out. So the very first thing I'm going to do before the dog breaks the rule, I'm going to hiss at them. I have 10 hisses. A level 1 hiss, like it's a level 10 hiss, which is more like a... he didn't respond normally, but her ears went right up. So we want to have that nuance. Remember, only hiss once per incident. A lot of people go... That makes it like a no. Gets very commonly used. So hiss 1 time per incident, matching the energy of the dog's energy. Intensity. Your intensity matches the dog's energy, as I can speak. Second consequence is to abruptly stand up. Remember, when you stand up, your authority goes whatever direction your belly button is pointing. Right now, my authority is pointing there. A dog will typically, when you stand up, is going to take a step backwards. And then it's going to move around the room to see, are you keeping your belly button pointing at me? If not, then I literally walked away from your authority. So once you stand up, the dog takes a step back, and then as it moves around, keep pivoting until it communicates that it's done challenging you. It will do that by standing still. You'll either stand in place, sit, or lie down. So it does any of those 3 things. I'm tracking. You stay still. 2 steps. I pause 1 second, then I can go back to normal. That's a good example of it. So, so the second consequence, stand up abruptly, turn to face the dog, keep it in front of you until it's stationary, then take 2 steps backwards, only 2 steps, pause 1 second, and go back to doing what you're doing. The third escalating consequence involves giving and taking territory. So it would be marching directly at the dog. So if the dog is marching at you, and you march at the dog and it backs up, and it's still facing you, it's still challenging you. So you're going to march directly at the dog until it tells you it's done challenging, and it's going to do this. And I'm the dog, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn sideways or greater. As soon as the dog turns sideways, you want to stop. Now this looks indecisive with my feet apart, so I'd complete my movement, and then I go to the second consequence. I'm pivoting as he moves around. Wait for him to be stationary. 2 steps backwards. Pause 1 second, and then I can go back, sit back down. Now, the only time this wouldn't account is if the dog is in a designated no zone. Well, actually, if it stops in a designated no dog zone. So if the dog, like one of the rules, the dog's not allowed to be within 7 feet of us when we're eating. So when the dog is approaching me, I'm going to hiss when it's at 8 feet. Once it crosses the 7-foot boundary, I would stand up and do that. It probably is going to move beyond the threshold.
Okay.
When I sit back down eventually, the dog's going to probably come back a second time. This time I'd march directly at the dog. But let's say the dog made it all the way to 2 feet from me before I start marching. I march at it and turn sideways right away, and it's now at 4 feet, but the boundary is still 7 feet. So I'm going to bump into the dog until it gets outside the boundary. And when I move towards the dog, I want to be moving pretty briskly. The Guardian was moving a little bit slow in the kitchen, and she was getting up to Victoria. If you move briskly, the dog kind of has a backing up, it wants to get out of your way sort of motion. Now, when you're marching at the dog, again, be deliberate. The Guardian at times was a little bit slow, or she stopped before she got to the dog. The dog needs to think, if I'm still here when the human gets here, the human is running me over. So I better get out of the way. Another little, I'll go back to the escalating consequence in a minute, but also don't walk around the dog. Did I talk about going around? I think I talked about that in this video. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the fourth escalating consequence, we do a leash timeout. And for the leash timeout, what we do is we put the dog on a leash and we step on it. As far away as the leash is from their butt, or the collar is from the butt, that's how far away on the leash we step on it. So in both these dogs, in Ferris's case, probably won't need to use that, but in her case, he'd be about 3 feet, she'd be about 2.5 feet. When I step on it, sometimes they throw a temper tantrum. If they do, I don't say a word. Wait, that's a good way to burn energy. When they get done, they will sit down, but they will sit as far away as the leash will allow, and the leash will be tense. That will activate their opposition reflex. As soon as you take your foot off, they're going to run away or run somewhere. So basically, as soon as the dog sits, and I do not tell it to sit. If I tell it to sit, it's following command. If it does it on its own, say I'm challenging you less. So as soon as it sits down, if it sits here, I take the foot that's on the leash, and I slide the foot and the leash towards the dog to take that tension off of the leash. Now, a minute or two later, the dog will actually lay down. When it lays down and it's calm, I very subtly take my foot off of the leash. The dog doesn't realize at this point it's free. When it finally does, it's going to get up and wander around. It's going to be dragging the leash. Now, it's dangerous for a dog to drag the leash around unsupervised. They can get caught on something and get injured. So only do this when you're supervised. But if the dog starts barking at your guest or doing something the wrong thing as it runs by you, you can step on the leash and reapply the consequence. Or if a couple minutes go by and the dog's pretty well behaved, we detach the leash. It's not a quid pro quo. But what we're saying is if you're going to be defiant, the consequence is you lose all freedom. When you return to a completely calm and balanced state of mind, freedom is restored. And that way we have a series of escalating consequences to disagree so the dog knows what's next. At first, you're going to have to hiss, stand, march, and then leash time out. After a while, it'll be hiss, stand, march. Then it'll be eventually hiss, stand, and eventually just hiss. Always start with your hiss. And eventually that's all you'll have to use. The only time I don't use the hiss is, let's say that Victoria's a little bit of a more sensitive dog. She's a rescue dog. She's only been here a couple weeks. Let's say that she's eating and Ferris tries to come in the room. I might not hiss at him at that point because she might get confused thinking the hiss is towards her.
Okay.
So if that's the case, I would probably just use the third consequence, march towards him and make him leave the area so I can do it silently. All right. Now, again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Text me. It's going to be much faster than calling me. This is Ferris and Victoria's Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.